Hello everyone, thank you for coming to this first track 1, session 1. This is Procure Performance Symposium. The name of this is Surviving the Rough Waters with Supplier Management. So let's welcome Stephen and Carl and Kat, and we'll get started. Thank you. And turn it over to Carl.
Thank you, Clay. Today's session is going to be a panel session here. We'll take about 25 minutes for questions we're asked the moderator, and then we're asked the audience to ask some questions. So think about what you may want to ask there. So let's get right into it. Kat, why don't you tell us about the current state of your supplier management in your organization, and kind of what were the challenges faced by you in your organization?
Okay, so from a supplier performance management perspective, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, good. From a supplier performance management perspective, we're pretty mature in that way. We've been doing this for a very long time. We adopted Zycus a couple of years ago, so we're wrapping up our second year with Zycus. Prior to Zycus, we had a homegrown tool. If you heard Alex Brown speak, he spoke a little bit about that homegrown tool. It was very clunky and it wasn't easy to use. It required a lot of investment of time from a category manager perspective, and then it wasn't user-friendly for our stakeholders. So it was always kind of a churn for us to do the supplier performance management, the scoring and whatnot. So we are pretty far along within the SPM process. We look at both direct, and they've been doing it for quite a long time, so measuring the direct suppliers on the material side. We are bringing up the indirect side. Like I said, we're finishing our second year. We have been doing indirect, but we weren't very disciplined about it. So we've been able to utilize Zycus to help us roll out more relevant, more impactful QBRs and scoring for some of our indirect suppliers. We have gone to a very standard scorecard. That's how we initially kind of rolled out our scoring from an indirect perspective, because we wanted to make sure that when we evaluate the scores across the supply base, that they're all measured on basically the same things. We have an award program that we have annually. We have an annual supplier day, and we have supplier of the year, and then we have some other tiered supplier awards. And so we're able to use that system as well to help us determine who the shortlist is for awards. So I hope that answers the question. I think from a challenges perspective, what I'm finding right now is our biggest challenge is not really a tool. The tool's great. It's very intuitive, easy to use. Adoption's been phenomenal. The challenge is more in getting the stakeholders really engaged in the process. They'll score, that's not a problem. The survey is quite easy to use. The problem is sometimes chasing them down and actually commit to doing the scoring, investing that time. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. And then beyond that, although the tool has made it easier, the problem now is getting good feedback from the scorecard. So getting those comments that can really help drive action from the supply base. So, good job isn't really going to get it done, right? You're looking for something actionable, especially where they have those weak spots. So where can be improved? So that's what we're working on, getting some concrete, actionable, relevant comments out of our stakeholders.
Thanks, Kat. So a follow-up question on that line. You guys have been doing this for a while. You're getting something like more improved efficiency, better automation.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of your suppliers are you doing the scorecards on, the SPM line? How has that changed over time, and how many are you actually doing that installed?
I don't have an actual number for you, but I'll just back up a little bit. We go through a segmentation process with our supply base. I'm sure many of you do that as well. And we have 3 tiers that we use, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So tier 1, we have a scorecard that we use to kind of help rank them out that way. And so it's a pretty small percentage that actually go through the formal process. You have to be a tier 1 or a tier 2 supplier to go through this formal process. Now, from time to time, we will choose to take some of our tier 3 for various reasons and take them through the process as well. But it's a pretty small percentage. I'd say less than 5% of our suppliers actually go through this formal process.
Steve, tell us about how Celgene is doing. Where you guys are at today?
We're basically been using the service about a year, and basically we've found that it's a very nice automated system that we didn't have before. Everything we tried to be manual before, physical QBRs in person, that was a big problem for us because we never really had anything to measure what was going on. Now with this service, it's repetitive. You can have reinforcement. You don't have to, you can put it together, and it goes out automatically. So that's the nice thing about it. We find that it's been really helpful that way because before they just got forgotten. I think that's the biggest problem. If you don't have a system in place, you never really get to square one. And that's been a big help for us. So last year we've had a lot of adoption. We see published events every week of all our people, and so the QBRs are working well. So I think that's been really good for us.
So along that line, Steve, what was the tip and what caused you guys to go to competing?
I think because of our growth, we had a lot of suppliers that we just weren't watching. And I think that was a big problem for us. We just knew, we were a fairly substantially growing company in the last 5 years. So So the thing about it is that just, you don't have to watch it at the house, you know, it's like the box in the hen house, it was really a problem for us. And we just wanted to have some controls and measures. I think it's something, once we realized we had it, it helped, and we got a lot of buy-in from the stakeholders.
So was there a good way that you helped build a business case? Because obviously it sounds like you got problems, you know the problems, but how do you build a business case and justify that?
I think the business case really just was, it was there. We just knew it was there. It wasn't really quantified anywhere, but we just knew that we had a lot of suppliers. You know, we probably had an international base of potentially 40,000 suppliers, which a lot of them were off. You know, so we had one-off suppliers. You just didn't have any control of that. And so by doing this service, we were able to consolidate, you know, some of the service, you know, find out who's best. We could, you know, basically eliminate the tail of the problems of the suppliers that we had, and got moved up the spend to a lot of preferred suppliers. We kind of have like a 300 preferred supplier base that we have in probably about 15 of our commodity categories that we use on a regular basis, and it seems to be working well. They like it a lot.
Good. So we've got some of the early stages and the later stages here. So as you talk about that, what are some of the near-term and the long-term goals you have? Where you want to be and where you want to get to your programs? Why don't you start first? Yeah, you're starting here. Our near-term goal was to get automated.
I think by being automated, it's impressive that we now have a system, and we go to these meetings actually prepared. You know, before we were not prepared, I think is where the problem was. So you know, we go, you kind of shake hands, trade notes, look at spend, but that was about where it left. Now we actually have input from our stakeholder what's really going on, where we can improve, or where we've been doing things right. So I think that's been really a big help. That was our near-term goal. I think we've accomplished that a little bit. Our long-term goal is obviously to have these repetitive and see where we grow strategically with our partners out there.
For us, I think near-term and long-term are pretty similar. It's making sure that the information is relevant that's coming out, that it's useful to suppliers, that you're really driving improved performance from your supplier base. Because it doesn't, we don't want it just to be a check-the-box exercise. Okay, I took my suppliers through the QBR twice a year, check, I get my gold star, right? You want it to be useful. You actually want to improve the performance. So it's making sure that we have as objective as possible, which is always challenging on the indirect side, scorecards that stay relevant and that you're keeping it interesting, you're keeping the stakeholders engaged. That's, and having quality QBRs, that's what we're focused on here now.
And have you what do you guys think? You talk, both help your suppliers. Are your suppliers using the system? Are they log in? Or you just share the data with them offline? And how are they viewing the system? Are they seeing this as a value add? Is what they have to do? Are they seeing additional value they get from having this tool available for you guys?
I think they find this valuable. We haven't used it, like I said, we're only a year into it, so we've just been sharing it recently, because a lot of them have just really matured the QBRs we've done. It has been very eye-opening to them, and I think it also shows where the improvement can be made. So that's been top for us.
Yeah, we use the supplier portal, so they, we'll push the supplier scorecards to them. They'll get the results on anything they like it. They like the transparency, and we're able to really get in and drill down and see the user feedback, so they appreciate the transparency. It's helping to drive some improvements, some areas that maybe they weren't aware of. We're also doing some new things. We're doing self-assessment, so we'll give them the same scorecard. We're just doing a couple here and there, and so it creates interesting, maybe where gaps are. Maybe they think they're great here, and we think, maybe not so much, and maybe the reverse is true. And then actually in sales and marketing, which is my area of spend, we're letting them score A and D. How are we doing? Are we a good business partner? Because we need to be a good business partner too. So it's interesting for us to see ourselves being scored, so we're able to use Zycus for that as well.
Okay. And along that line, you guys have both described scorecard being one of the primary exhibit. Are you guys using other things, or do you see a future where you may have onboard suppliers, update their information on certificates online, use development programs to improve what they may suggest back to you guys? How do you see that evolving with your organizations?
That's where I'd like to see us increase usage is in the develop module. We do have CIPs. One of the things that we drive out of it, again, is to improve the performance. So anytime, our scale is 0 to 100. So anytime there's a score in any particular area that's below 70, going to require a continuous improvement plan or corrective action plan. And right now, those really sit outside the Zycus for the most part. We're doing them in Excel, and we track them separately. I know there's the develop module. Looking for a couple of tweaks to it to kind of make it, to maximize it. That's where I'd like to see us drive, so that there's also a place for it to be retained and not just sitting on someone's hard drive. So when you have changes that happen, someone can pick right up. And the supplier can also, you can push tasks to them as well. So I'd like to see us leverage that a little more.
Sure. Yeah, we're planning to do that in the near future. With the suppliers bringing the information, certificates, things like that. We just really, we felt that that's something we had lacked in the past, and it's definitely, at least gives us the opportunity to do that. That's what we're headed.
And besides just the improved visibility and scorecards, have you seen other things that of value? Reduction of cycle time, increasing throughput, ability to handle more supplier, other productivity needs, what kind of value you receive beyond just improved scorecards and more scorecards?
So for, as a lead source manager and having to actually do this work and kind of doing this on the side, what I'm finding is it's definitely some process efficiencies around the scorecard creation. Zycus makes it very nice in terms of having that recurring feature where you can just, start at the beginning of the year and you can set up an event. If you're a tier 1 supplier at AMD, you're going to be scored quarterly. So you can have that push quarterly. So we're seeing efficiencies in terms of that scorecard creation. It's more intuitive. So we're able to create these events and push these events quickly without, just a lot better and more smooth. In terms of, from the stakeholder perspective, it's also easier for them. In our old system, it was, like I said, quite clunky. And it was a lot of work to get them to even find how to get to the scorecard. You had to navigate them. There was a lot of time just spent on the phone dealing with our clients who were trying to score. This makes it quick. There's a unique link that they go and score. So we're saving a lot of time in terms of running the events.
And we found that the stakeholders really didn't have a system of what they could actually go to and give their input. This is really a big help to us because we just didn't have the opportunity for it. I think now with having it that goes out to them on a regular basis, they kind of know the system now. They actually, now we have more penetration that more of them are actually responding. In fact, there was a problem at the beginning because most of the people that responded were only 4 answers. So it gave us a lot of bad vibes. So we had to, have more penetration when we were actually sending out to the groups.
Sure. And along the same line, as you set up your scorecards and your metrics, how have those changed over time? So you start collecting metrics and you want to collect more metrics. How are those adapted across your supply base, and how do you flow that out to suppliers in a fair fashion?
Are you talking in terms of the KPIs
The
themselves?
KPIs themselves, yes. You start one area, now you start realizing, well, we may need to look at other that we didn't look at before. Adapting, making the changes, and flowing that out to the team.
Like I said, we were pretty mature along our process, so I felt like we had a pretty good handle on what we wanted to score. So there have been a whole lot of changes. Some changes we made on the indirect side is just trying to get a little bit more standardized and make sure that everyone's asking basically the same kinds of questions. Now maybe we've gone a little bit too far. We're looking at it now as a time that we're going to start looking at potentially changing up some of the questions in the scorecard. So then maybe we'll go back a little bit the other way where we make it a little more customized and more relevant to our stakeholders. So one scorecard for marketing isn't necessarily going to be relevant to a software provider. So we're looking at maybe going back, like I said, and customizing it a little bit more.
That's what we did. We made a standard system. So we use that again. Now we find that as we do different commodities, we add a future question and future KPIs that seem to be strictly specific to that commodity. That's been a big help to us because you have a standard question that should be on every scorecard, but then you want to add a few extras because this area really commands that. That's been helpful.
On those lines, as you collect your metrics, you collect them from both internal users as well as the supplier, or just one internal user providing feedback versus our supplier part of the scoring process.
Sometimes we use a supplier. Most of the time it's strictly our stakeholder. That's how we evaluate that.
If we collect supplier feedback, it'll be on a separate scorecard. We don't want their scores to influence their overall score, so we'll have a separate scorecard for them.
So you haven't been able to see yet there's a disconnect between the two.
Well, we do, once we get the results, we're able to compare and see where some of the disconnects might be,
And as you guys, going back to some of the internal tools and went out and looked at Zycus and some other people, what are some of the key criteria that you look for in a solution out there?
We wanted it to be easy to use and intuitive. It needed to be flexible or global. We wanted to roll this out globally. So it needed to be able to address any potential regional differences, commodity differences. So those are the kinds of things that we were looking for. And something that can be super supportive, which Zycus has been great at that as well.
We found the commodity managers, because of the ease of use, they all actually use it. Where before, a lot of times they just wouldn't use anything because they just didn't really have it. Oh wait, this is very easy. They got trained on it, and so the adoption was high. And I think that was where the problem was in the past. We did manual things, and it really never worked. And this now is definitely a good system for us.
So it's how I'm clear. You had users that wanted to do scoring, not a good tool. So the change management process, especially going through the tool, was not that difficult.
At all, that was called very
Were there any additional benefits you see, you noticed and you realized from the Youngman system?
I would say perhaps we got a better scoring out of the scoring team, because in our old system, it was you would key in the score you wanted to give them, and we would kind of give them a range, or they were able to kind of manipulate perhaps the score. I really don't want to give them a 7, I want to give them a 5. So they're able to manipulate the score a bit. Here, the way it's set up is we don't show the scoring, so we're just picking a behavior. The supplier behaves like this with this question, And the scoring's on the back end, they don't see it, so we're able to get, I think, better score results from that process.
And we find the weightages, since we control them, and we don't unless they allow an override per se, we kind of get better results and it's consistent. I think that's what we saw that right away, that, people put the right answers in, and then suddenly on the back end, we, based on what the commodity managers read you on these weightages, that seems to work best for us.
Okay. And what, as you roll this system out in your project, what were some of the best practices that you can share with the audience here in terms of what they should consider emulating, mistakes you guys made in the rollout process, what are the lessons learned from rolling this out? It sounds like you've gone through it 2 or 3 times, so what were some of the major lessons here?
So for best practices, I think one of the things that helps drive adoption as well, to make it easier for me since I was doing this kind of on the side, so to speak, was to do a lot of upfront training. So I was the implementation lead, and we decided, and this will be in my mistakes area, doing a global all-at-once rollout. So I wanted to make it was just kind of me, and I had a team, of course. But anyway, so I didn't do a lot of upfront training because I didn't want to have a lot of problems on the back end when they didn't understand how to use the tool. So we did some early training, then I waited and I did a refresh. So we had kind of the face-to-face training, classroom setting when possible. And then we did some on-demand content that was available online that we stored on our SharePoint site so they could go and reference it if I wasn't available. So we didn't have a team, the luxury of having a team or someone dedicated to it. They had that on-demand capability. And then, there's the classroom setting where it's just fictional, right? And there's actual, okay, now it's time for everyone to go out and create their scorecards. That's when they really start to crystallize what their questions are, and they find out what the obstacles are that they're having in terms of creating their scorecards. So I held some office hours. I would just book a conference room for a few hours and have people come in and they could create their scorecards. So that helped kind of get them into that habit and understanding how to create scorecards. So it helps adoption from that perspective as well.
Yeah, we found that the refresh training was very important, because you can clone the event and the questions and things like that. That was a big help. So once they found something they liked, the pattern for their particular commodity, that's what they really were able to, from the training, go on and on and on, and go forward. But, otherwise, they felt like they were getting lost. But we had some standard questions we gave them initially, and they all sort of adopted and customized their commodity. But that was the biggest help. Just a few refreshers. Now we find that the events are being published every week. It's really, the adoption is going way up.
Along those lines, how have you used the actual scores and metrics in other parts of your business? So for instance, having if a supplier score is too low, is it just a score that they got and you can improve, or do you take them up and improve supplier list? Do you use it to drive source notice, you get more business? What kind of incentive do you give suppliers, or disincentives using these scores?
Well, we haven't had like I said, we haven't had it long enough to really, we've done a little bit of the improvement action. That's what we're using for. So I guess I can't really speak for a long-term experience. You may well speak better than that, but we have segmented, got with the supplier, had something we thought about at the QBR session, so that was important. But we haven't gone maturity level at 3 or 4 quarters yet.
So in that perspective, if they do well, they have potential to be recognized as Supplier of the Year, and suppliers always like that. They get the press release, they get the award, they like that stuff. So that's the good side. In terms of, when they don't do so well, we don't necessarily take away business per se, but we do look at it in our scorecard. We'll often bake that in. If there's a QBR score that can be evaluated, we'll bake that into our supplier selection scorecard, and it'll impact it from that perspective.
So you may, if they do a source notice, it may be a better criteria for them if they've been a good supplier.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay, excellent. As you roll this out, the number of users using the system, does it go across different audiences? I mean, obviously, you used to use procurement users using the system. Do you have engineering? What other groups actually use the tool to provide scorecards? How do you extend it out to different departments within your organization?
So procurement, they'll be the event owners. They're the ones driving and creating the events and managing all of that. From a scoring perspective, it would really be whatever group is, whatever supplier impacts that stakeholder. So we have engineering, we have marketing, IT, and we have the whole gamut of A&D is involved in the scoring process. It's a supplier that's relevant to them. So it's their scores, and that's how they're involved. And then they're involved in the feedback and helping guide some of the QBR discussions as well.
The commodity managers drive the whole thing for us. And basically, that's what it is. Now they have their analysts that are involved in it directly. They kind of feel what questions have been worked at the last QBR, and if they need to change them and fix it. So we've been able to customize it and learn as we go.
And as you guys are rolling this out to your stuff here, is part of the goal that you can hopefully reduce the amount of time you spend on scorecards to get scores so you can do other functions, or you hope to increase the scorecards across your supplier base so you have more suppliers being scored? What's kind of the long-term goal that you guys want to roll this out?
We definitely want to add more suppliers. That's the whole idea. So we're trying to spread it out so we can get more suppliers consistently being reviewed. And that's been our goal, but I think it's improved already because I guess we started a year and a half ago. There are a few being, looked at. Now we're up to a decent level, so we're probably in the hundreds now.
For us, based on where we are right now, I'd say it's reducing the amount of time required to spend scoring and running an event. That way we can transition that time to actually improving supplier performance and managing the supplier versus creating scorecards, collecting the scores, building the deck. So if the tool can improve that, then we can repurpose that time, so to speak, where it's more impactful.
Sure. And along those lines, what have you guys seen as best practice in terms of the scoring frequency? Is it quarterly? Is it annual? How often do you guys score your suppliers and provide those updated scores?
We have the two tiers that I mentioned earlier. So if you're a tier 1 supplier, we're pretty prescribed about it. Your tier 1 supplier, you're going to get scored quarterly, and you're going to have 2 business reviews, 2 formal business reviews. And then a tier 2, you're going to have at least 1 scorecard and 1 business review. And I think that works pretty well. I'd say for the tier 2, it'd be better to do at least twice a year. That way you can see some improvement over the course of the year versus you just see it annually. It's not probably the right frequency. So I'd say score at least twice a year, maybe only have 1 formal business review. Because at the end of the day, you only have so many procurement people and you've got a lot of suppliers, so you got to allocate those resources smartly.
We see the higher percentage of ones we do quarterly are probably a very select few suppliers. And we kind of expand out the other ones we kind of just score and we do it, semi-annual, things like that. But I think it's worked for us that, we have, key suppliers in each commodity that we probably do those and do them on a quarterly basis. But a lot of times the majority comes out to twice a year is probably most we do it.
And if you guys roll the system out, it's not the initial system and now you roll the Zycus system here, what kind of timeline do you recommend most people consider in terms of rolling out, training people, using the system starting to work? What kind of timeline you guys have seen as a best practice or recommendation approach?
Certainly probably between 4 and 6 months before full adoption. I felt. In 2 months we were ready to go, but I think it took another 2 months with some refresher training and some other, headaches that they didn't understand what they were doing, and suddenly once we retrained them, it worked out well. By 6 months, we were kind of moving a little forward.
I think 6 months sounds about right. You should expect it to take about 6 months to do the implementation. And we wanted to do it, like I said, globally and all at once. So I would actually recommend if you're looking to do this, maybe do a more of a phased approach. It was a lot to do the globe. And it was just kind of me, so it was a lot to take on. So, I would say if you can, if the timing affords it, to do a phased approach. And then you can, get lessons learned and then apply that towards your other areas as you kind of go through the implementation roadmap.